All right, welcome to part two of this lecture. And we're not going to actually finish what I have up on RenWeb. We're going to stop here on page 457. And in tomorrow's lesson on Friday, 424, we're going to talk about Operation Barbarossa and Hitler's attack of the Soviet Union. Now, if you hear squealing and a lot of noise behind me, that's because my little one is in here just playing around. So hopefully you can concentrate and it won't be too much. Hey, do you want to come say hi real quick to the camera? Come here and say hi to him. No, come here. So that you can say hi to him. Okay, can you say hi again? The camera? Okay, there we go. Perfect. You keep doing your thing. All right, so we talked about, in part one of this lecture, the Luftwaffe and how the German Air Force in Operation Sea Lion was going to try to bomb England into submission. In order to do this, they had to destroy the RAF, the Royal Air Force. But the Royal Air Force had the upper hand due to the new invention of radar, being able to detect German planes, the Luftwaffe, as they were crossing over the English Channel. And you might think, well, numbers destroy smaller numbers anytime, no matter if they had radar or not. Not necessarily the case. The RAF, or the pilots in the RAF, were extremely skilled, even though they had lesser numbers. But because they were given a heads up of the Luftwaffe approaching because of radar, they were able to run and get into their planes and get into the air and meet the Luftwaffe at the cliffs of Dover or at the edge of England, the island. So the RAF flew as many as 5 flights a day to protect their homeland. I want you to understand that that is physically taxing on an individual. These RAF pilots were going on very, very little sleep. Some of you say, well, I go on very little sleep, anyway. Well, yes, but you're still sleeping in class. Okay, you're catching up on that sleep somewhere. I know, that was a good joke, wasn't it? So, these RAF pilots were getting very little sleep and going up into the air, risking their lives as much as 5 times a day. Now, I actually wrote a paper on the Battle of Britain, and what I ended up coming to the conclusion with is that the English people, they did experience a lot of damage with their buildings and with things of that nature. There were also thousands of deaths, because of the bombing raids on these English cities. Psst. Hey. There you go, be quiet. So, yes, they were experiencing civilian casualties. Yes, there were buildings that were being bombed. Imagine living in England at this time, where you're having a nice cup of tea, chatting it up with an old friend, and then you hear the bomb sirens go off. And so you run down into the bunkers and hide for cover, many people going into the subway stations, and then hearing all of this bombing go on, hoping that your home isn't being bombed, that one of your family members is not out in the middle of danger. But one thing that I read and that I thought was very interesting is that the English people have a history of exhibiting resilience. That it's just who they are in nature. Very gravely optimistic. Like they're willing to encounter anything, even if it's the most grave circumstances. They're like, well, what else are you going to do? We might as well just get on with it. And so what I read is that these people did not want the bombings to interrupt with their daily life because they knew if the bombings were to interrupt their daily lives and they were just to be afraid the whole time, hunkering down in their home, that's no way to live. They said, we will be defeated emotionally as a people if we let these bombings control our daily lives. And so the English people, they would go down into the bunkers whenever they would hear the bomb sirens. But then, after the bombing had stopped, they would just resume their daily affair. So let's say someone was having tea and was drinking tea, heard the bomb sirens, went down to the bunker. If they came back up, and the tea parlor wasn't bombed, they would just resume drinking their tea and their conversation. There were people who would be playing badminton or tennis or golf, and they would hear the bomb sirens. They would try to escape. Yeah, I know. Yeah, they would try to escape. Then once the bombings were over, if their playing field or court hadn't been damaged, they would just resume their game. They wanted to resume daily life. And so what Hitler found is that not only was it difficult to physically defeat the RAF, but it was extremely difficult and impossible to defeat the English people emotionally and mentally. And so I think that we can take that into account with how we live our daily lives. When we encounter difficulties, are we emotionally and mentally weak to the point where we're like, woe is me, the sky is falling, this is awful, I can't go on, it's just terrible? Or do we take off the drama coat, okay, or drama jacket, drama hat, okay, and say, you know what? I'm going to encounter this problem head on. It's life. There's nothing we can do about it. Might as well just try to move forward. Winston Churchill provided great leadership during this time. One of my favorite pictures of Winston Churchill is him walking about the streets of London among the rubble and wreckage after a bombing raid. Would we ever see a president stay hunkered down in a city that was being bombed, and then after the bombing was over, come out and walk among the wreckage like he was an average civilian? No. And this provided the English people with invigoration. It invigorated them. It inspired them. And they thought, if our leader is here among these bombs with us, then we can survive too, and we can move on too. And so this was a great leadership opportunity for Winston Churchill. In fact, after the Germans pulled out, and not necessarily pulled out, but they told the Luftwaffe to stop and move on to another phase, Winston Churchill said, never in the field of human conflict was so much owed by so many to so few. And what he means by that is the so many that owe a lot to the few, the so many are the English citizens. And those English citizens owe so much to the few. And who are the few? None other than the RAF, those pilots who are risking their lives 5 times a day, flying over England to keep their homeland safe from the German Luftwaffe. All right, so that is where we are going to stop today. I'm trying to think if there's anything else that I want to pick up with. Oh, yes, real quick. After Germany had successfully invaded France, they set up what we call puppet governments, meaning that Hitler was not able to be in France personally and just control everything. So he needed someone to control on his behalf. So they set up a puppet government. And this puppet government was called Vichy France. So Vichy France was the Nazi fascist government that ruled in France under Hitler. And so that even they even had a French puppet governor who was basically a puppet of the Nazis. Basically a puppet of the Nazis controlling that area for Hitler. And so we call that Vichy France. So Vichy France had fallen under Nazi control. And so if you were a French Allied fighter, you were not safe because there were Nazi laws and regulations that were implemented in France at that time until the Allied powers, with the help of the United States, would raid the beaches of Normandy. But that's for another lecture. All right, so that's where I'm going to stop today. Tomorrow I'll pick up with page 457 and complete that and go into Pearl Harbor. So I know what I have on RenWeb. That's subject to change, okay? But we will have a quiz, I believe, on Monday. So don't quote me on that, but that's what I'm thinking of doing. I'll let you know in Friday's lecture for sure how we're going to go about this. Have a great rest of the day. Take care.